Hello dear friends, welcome back, welcome again. Today is Christmas, so wish you all Merry Christmas. Stay tuned with me to the end, where the holiday magic comes alive. Let's spread some cheer together this season. Let me start the family talk stories. I think my boyfriend is lying to me and is gay with his best friend. We are set to get married soon. The idea of love has always been a constant presence in my life, as it seems like everything happens in movies and happiness is just waiting to happen. Upon meeting Jack, I believed I had found myself. He had a charming personality, great humor, and it was apparent that he loved me to pieces. After our initial closest friendship, we developed into a much more intimate and committed team. That's how I ended up, months away from finally getting married to the man I thought I was marrying. I've been questioning everything I assumed I knew about him lately. This is my story, Annie. It seems like I'm about to tie the knot with the man I have strong feelings for. Still, there's that creepy feeling in the head, like something isn't right. It was during our dining experience at the beloved Monte Carlo restaurant that Jack and I first encountered the first crack in my perfect world. We sat at the table that was always our spot, in the corner by the window, and watched the city's activity unfold. On that frigid evening, the restaurant's warmth created a warm and cozy atmosphere around us. However, there was something off that night. It appeared that Jack was being distant, more than usual. He kept looking at his mobile phone, examining it every few minutes as if something significant was occurring that I wasn't. Although I tried to avoid it, the situation surfaced. It was always the case when he was like this. I sounded calm, but there was a hint of concern in my voice. "All right, then," I said. He maintained a close eye contact on his phone while saying, "Let's do some work. You know how it is." Nodding averted, but my conviction was still present. I couldn't help but feel like I was being excluded from something, especially since Jack had been acting a little different lately. Among them, his dearest pal Greg. Their bond had been strong for years, and they were inseparable. Greg was a funny, easygoing guy I liked, but then something about his relationship started creeping up my mind. The way they jokingly joked, how Greg would touch Jack's arm or back in a special, but extraordinary, way. Despite my efforts, I was convinced that I had been paranoid. Could it be considered simply being friends? Yet doubts began to mount. Gradually, I moved ahead and eventually couldn't seem to ignore them. Eventually. A Friday night marked the turning point a few weeks later. Jack had gone out with Greg on Fridays, as they often hung out together. At a bar, they would drink and share news of work or personal life while shooting the breeze. Just as I did, Jack deserved to spend time with his friends, and I never regretted it. Nevertheless, something changed that night. It was like there was an electric spark in the air, a feeling of anticipation that I couldn't explain. The moment was just as powerful for me. As I crammed my schedules for the wedding, I found myself waiting in line for Jack to arrive home. I almost jumped out of my skin when the sound from my phone started to ring. It was Jack's text, saying, "I'm staying with Greg tonight. His friends are hosting him, so I'll be leaving late. Don't wait up." There was something about the message that made me feel sad. It was strange that he didn't appear at all late without me knowing where/what. I used to be assured by Jack, who would send me a picture or check in. This time, there was nothing. The tone of the message was cold and detached. Before I could act, I stared at my phone and then decided to ignore them. Jack used to tell lies to me, did he? Is that true? He wouldn't. The night's intensity made it difficult for me to stop thinking. My attempts to stifle my doubts and distract myself with TV shows often resulted in Jack and Greg appearing together, laughing and possibly even holding hands. They were kind of like family. There was no way to make sense of what had occurred. The next morning, I woke up to find that Jack hadn't returned home. His side of the bed was still empty, and for a moment, I felt a pang of irritation. We were supposed to be getting married soon. Wasn't it strange for him to be out so late, especially after he promised me that we were building a life together. I tried to shrug it off, but as the hours passed and there was still no sign of him, my anxiety began to spiral. I tried calling him twice, but both calls went straight to voicemail. This wasn't like Jack. Just as I was about to call again, my phone buzzed. It was a message from him. "Hey babe, sorry I didn't come home last night. Greg's place turned into an all-nighter. I crashed on the couch. I'll be home soon." I stared at the text, my stomach sinking. There was nothing in that message that screamed sincerity or care. Just a vague explanation that left me with more questions than answers. Why didn't he call or text earlier? Why was it always Greg's place? Why didn't he ever invite me along? I had to know. I just had to. That afternoon, I drove to Greg's apartment. My heart pounded in my chest as I parked in front of the building, unsure of what I was hoping to find. I told myself I was just being paranoid, that Jack was probably just drunk or caught up in the moment and that everything would make sense when I saw him. But as I stood in front of the door to Greg's apartment, I realized I didn't know what to expect at all. I knocked. My hand was trembling as I waited, listening to the faint sounds of movement inside. After a moment, the door creaked open, and there stood Greg, still in his clothes from last night, looking a little disheveled. "Annie," he said, surprised. "What's up?" "I need to talk to Jack," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is he here?" Greg's expression shifted slightly, and for a moment, I thought I saw something like guilt flash across his face. But then, he shook his head. "He left a little while ago. He said he was coming to see you." I couldn't help the frustration that bubbled to the surface. "I've been trying to reach him all morning. Why didn't he tell me he stayed here?" Greg took a deep breath, running a hand through his messy hair. "Annie, look, maybe it's not my place to say this, but you've got to talk to Jack. He's been going through some stuff lately, and it's affecting everything, his relationship with you, with me." I felt a knot form in my stomach. "What do you mean, going through some stuff?" Greg hesitated. "He's been struggling with his feelings. About you. About us." "About us?" My voice cracked slightly, though I tried to remain composed. "What are you talking about?" Greg sighed, looking away. "Annie, I think you need to talk to Jack. He's not the same person he was when you first met him." I didn't know what to say. 1,000 questions swirled in my head, but I couldn't find the words to ask them. Before I could respond, I heard the sound of footsteps behind me, and I turned to see Jack. His face was unreadable, and his eyes avoided mine. "Annie," he said quietly, almost too calmly. "We need to talk." We sat in the living room of Greg's apartment, the silence between us thick and suffocating. Jack was fidgeting, running his fingers through his hair as he avoided my gaze. I felt like I was suffocating. I had so many questions, but I couldn't seem to form them all at once. Finally, Jack looked up at me. "Annie. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I never wanted to." My heart raced. "What do you mean? What's going on, Jack?" He hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I think you deserve the truth. I've been lying to you, about a lot of things." "Lying?" I repeated, feeling the sting of the word. "What do you mean?" "I care about you, Annie." "I really do," Jack said softly. "But I'm not in love with you. Not the way you think I am." My breath caught in my throat. "What?" He looked at me, his expression filled with pain. "I've been lying to myself for a long time. I'm not who you think I am. I think I'm in love with Greg." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. The room spun, and I felt like I might pass out. Jack and Greg? Was this what I'd been sensing all along? Were the signs always there, and I was just too blind to see them? "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. Jack's voice broke as he spoke. I was too scared, Annie. I've always been scared. Scared of disappointing you, scared of losing you, and even more terrified of what this would mean for both of us. I didn't know how to tell you the truth. I thought if I just kept pretending, maybe it would go away. But it never did. I sat there in stunned silence, my heart beating painfully in my chest. The words Jack had just said felt like a slow, cruel unraveling of everything I thought I knew about our relationship. How could this be happening? How could I have been so blind? Had I really not seen the signs, or had I just chosen to ignore them? While Greg was sitting in the corner of the room, he became uncomfortable in his seat. I couldn't see him in the mirror, but it seemed like he felt sorry for me and could even feel guilty. Despite not being the one who caused me pain, he was still included in the picture, the hidden truth that had been hiding for some time. Jack. I was unable to express my thoughts. After some time, I choked deeply and believed we were working together towards building a future. I believed we were going to get married. I thought you loved me. Jack rushed to say, I love you, Annie, with a desperate expression. Annie, I love her, but not in the way that I expected her to. It doesn't make sense from my perspective, but it differs with Greg. I apologize, but it's not true. Despite my efforts to deny and avoid it, I am still struggling. This is why. I was unable to control my tears. It was so emotional. The person I had arranged to marry and have complete trust in, was telling me that everything was untrue. It was heartbreaking. There was someone who had been there with him all along, and he wasn't alone in his uncertainty. It was as if the betrayal had pulled at my soul's throat, crushing me. My question was more of a request than requisition, so I asked, "What's up, Jack? Why did we delay marriage until now? What was the point of it?" His eyes closed, visibly divided, his mind in turmoil. I didn't mean to cause you any harm. I didn't want to cause any harm. But it got to the point where I was no longer capable of pretending. I didn't want to ruin your life, but I also didn't wish to keep lying to you. My wish was not to damage either of my own. He spoke with a gentle voice as Greg cleared his throat. Annie, I didn't mean to cause any of this upset. It was just that, Jack and I. It's not our fault, but we have tried to fight it off. While I am aware that this will cause you harm, it is impossible for him to continue living a lie. I nodded in confusion, unsure of what to do. I was almost overcome with anger, but so was I. I felt humiliated. Betrayed. It was impossible for me to look at Greg and not scream. What made him appear so withdrawn, sitting there like anyone was talking to him? How could this be? How long ago was this? How much time had passed since I became a fool? Request. But I must say, it was a heart-wrenching experience. I couldn't cope with the destruction of my dreamlike life, which was now shattered into nothingness. You should have informed me earlier, I said, shivering in my voice, before the wedding was booked. Before we began planning for our future together. You can't even be honest with me, Jack, I gave you everything. Annie, a broken voice, said, I'm sorry, Jack. He didn't mean to be rude. Despite my lack of desire to hurt you, I have caused you harm. Why? For that, I will always regret. I had the urge to scream at him. I wanted to convey to him the extent of the harm he had caused me. I stooped back and stood up, feeling my legs moving as I did. I can't. This is impossible to do, I have no clue what to say, I said, unable to hear. I must go. I experienced some of the most challenging days that followed. Despite my hesitations, my sister Ellie was there to take me in and not pose any excessive questions. It didn't motivate me to articulate the full extent of what had transpired. The wound was so irreversible that I struggled to understand the devastation. Jack had reached out to me several times during the early hours, but I was unable to respond. I had no idea what words to say to him. What could I say? What is your reaction to the man you had hoped to wed, but later discovered that his love for you was not as genuine as he initially claimed? I began to find some peace and calmness in the days that passed. It was a painful, slow process. I had to. The thought of remaining in this limbo was not an option for me. Despite my uncertainty about the direction, I had to move forward. Ellie's support was exceptional, as she always was. When I needed to speak, she gave me a gentle nudge to leave the house and start moving forward. It was a struggle, but I started to concentrate on my own development. I immersed myself in my work, hobbies, and anything that could divert my attention from the painful pain in me. Over time, the pain became less suffocating. How could it not go away? I learned to cope with it. My self-worth surpassed my own. Jack arrived at Ellie's apartment a month later. He stayed at the door until he made contact without any prior notice. The sight of him standing there made my heart race. He softly asked, "Annie, can we talk today?" while his face was drawn and he appeared pale. His eyes were swollen, as if he had been crying. It only made me angrier. My voice remained steady as I said, "I don't know what we've got to say, Jack." I was still feeling my heart break. "Why are you here?" "I need to apologize. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I can't bear to see that I hurt you this way." After that, I stared at him for a long time without any choice but to move on. I had a desire to tear up him and scream, in order to convey the extent of his destruction. The other part of me, who was quiet and rational, knew that I couldn't continue to suffer. I said, "I don't know how you can forgive me, Jack. But you've done more than I did." My voice remained cold. "I need to move on. I need to let go." He looked devastated. "Annie. I'm so sorry. I never intended to cause you any pain. I was too self-centered to acknowledge my own identity." I swore, my throat incessantly open. I knew. But you've made your choice. And I've made mine. It's over." Jack's face was groaning, and I almost felt compassion for him. I recalled to myself, I can't allow myself to be sorry for him now. My choice had to be made with his decision. "I have to go," I whispered. "This is not something I am capable of doing." Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked away from him, back into the apartment, closing the door behind me. As the sound of Jack's footsteps faded away, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. It's been almost a year since that day. Jack and I haven't spoken since our last encounter. He's with Greg now, and I'm not sure if I'll ever truly understand how I missed the signs for so long. But in the end, that doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that I've found my strength, my independence, and my peace. I'm still figuring things out, but I've learned to trust myself again. I've learned that the love I thought I had with Jack was never the love I deserved. I've learned that I am worthy of a love that doesn't come with lies, doubts, or hidden truths. And in time, I'll find it. For now, though, I'm focusing on me. I'm rebuilding. And that's enough. Thank you for watching and listening the story. Good night. All have a great sleep. We meet on the next Family Tales and Truths. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe.